Captain Jiho stood on the bridge of his small ship and watched the stars. He had been exploring space for 3 years now, looking for new worlds and new life. His ship was called the Dauntless, and it was not very big. Only 12 people lived on it, but they were good people. They were brave and smart. "Captain, I see something strange," said Sunmi. She was the person who talked to other ships and studied alien languages. Her voice was worried. "There is a big ship coming toward us. It is much bigger than ours." Jiho looked at the screen. The ship was huge, maybe 10 times bigger than the Dauntless. It was white and smooth, like it was made of glass or crystal. Beautiful lights moved across its surface. It did not look like any human ship he had ever seen. "What do you think, Taewon?" Jiho asked his engineer. Taewon was quiet most of the time, but he was very good at fixing things and understanding how machines worked. Taewon looked at his instruments. "The ship uses energy in a way I have never seen before. It is not dangerous right now, but it could be if they wanted it to be. They are much more advanced than us." The alien ship stopped moving when it got close to the Dauntless. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Then Sunmi's communication system started making noise. "They are trying to talk to us," she said. "The language is strange, but I think I can understand some of it. They want to meet with us." Jiho felt nervous, but excited. This was what he had been hoping for during all his years in space. Real contact with alien life. "Tell them we want to meet too, but we need to be careful." The alien ship sent a small shuttle to the Dauntless. When it arrived, 3 aliens came out. They were tall and thin, with pale blue skin. Their heads were larger than human heads, and their eyes were big and dark. They wore long white robes that seemed to glow with soft light. The leader of the aliens stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice went directly into their minds instead of making sound with his mouth. "I am High Priest Velthar of the Velothi Empire. We have traveled far to meet your species. You are called humans, yes?" Jiho felt strange hearing the voice in his head, but he tried to stay calm. "Yes, we are humans. I am Captain Jiho. This is Sunmi and Taewon. We come in peace." Velthar's large eyes studied the humans carefully. "Peace. Yes. We will decide if your kind brings peace or danger. We have ways to know the truth about your intentions." The other 2 aliens with Velthar said nothing, but Jiho could feel them watching everything. Their eyes seemed to look right, through him, like they could see his thoughts. "We have met many species in the galaxy," Velthar continued. "All of them we understand quickly. We read their minds and know their hearts. This is our gift. This is how we keep peace in our empire." Sunmi stepped forward. She had studied many alien cultures and knew how to be polite. "We are honored to meet you, High Priest. We hope we can learn from each other." Velthar made a sound that might have been laughter, but it was not friendly. "Learn from you? Little human, you are very new to the galaxy. Your minds are simple and young, but we will see. We will look inside your thoughts and understand everything about your species." Taewon moved closer to Jiho. He did not like the way the aliens were talking. It reminded him of bad times in his past, when people had tried to control him. "What do you mean, look inside our thoughts?" Jiho asked. "We are telepaths," Velthar explained. "We can read minds like you read books. We will know if you lie. We will know if you plan to hurt us. We will know everything you have ever done and everything you might do." The High Priest gestured toward his ship. "You will come with us, Captain." We will perform the soul-reading ceremony. It is our tradition when we meet new species. Do not be afraid. It will not hurt your body. Jiho looked at his crew. Sunmi looked worried, and Taewon looked angry, but they both nodded. They trusted their captain to make the right choice. "I will come with you," Jiho said, "but my crew stays here, and we keep talking to each other. If something happens to me, they need to know." Velthar agreed. "Your crew may watch from your ship. The ceremony is sacred, but it is not secret. You will see that we mean no harm to those who mean no harm to us." Jiho followed the aliens to their shuttle. As they flew to the big crystal ship, he looked back at the Dauntless. It looked very small next to the alien vessel. He hoped he was making the right choice. The inside of the alien ship was beautiful and strange. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with gentle light. Everything was smooth and curved. There were no sharp edges anywhere. The air smelled like flowers and rain. Velthar led Jiho to a large round room in the center of the ship. The floor was covered with soft cushions, and more crystals grew from the ceiling like upside-down trees. Other aliens were waiting there, all dressed in the same glowing robes. "This is the Chamber of Truth," Velthar said. "Here we will look into your mind and see what kind of creature you are. Sit here in the center." Jiho sat down on the cushions. The aliens formed a circle around him. They began to make a low humming sound that seemed to come from deep in their chests. "Do not fight what you feel," Velthar said as he knelt beside Jiho. "Let your mind be open. We have done this thousands of times with hundreds of species. None have ever been harmed." The high priest placed his long, thin fingers on Jiho's temples. His skin was cold and smooth. The humming grew louder, and the crystals in the room began to glow brighter. "Now we will see who you really are, human," Velthar whispered. Then his mind reached out and touched Jiho's thoughts. The ceremony had begun. Velthar closed his eyes and let his mind flow into the human's thoughts. He had done this ceremony so many times before. Always, it was the same. He would touch an alien mind and find simple thoughts, basic emotions, and clear memories. Most species thought in straight lines, one idea after another, easy to read and understand. But when Velthar's consciousness entered Jiho's mind, everything went wrong. The first thing that hit him was noise. Not sound, but mental noise. The humans. Mind was like a busy market where thousands of people were all talking at once. There was not one voice in Jiho's head, but many voices, all speaking at the same time. One voice was thinking about the ceremony and wondering if he was safe. Another voice was remembering what he had eaten for breakfast. A third voice was singing an old song from his childhood. A fourth voice was worried about his crew. A fifth voice was thinking about a girl he had loved years ago. Velthar tried to focus on one thought, but the voices kept changing and mixing together. Just when he thought he understood something, 3 new thoughts would appear and cover it up. Then he found the emotions, and they made even less sense. Jiho was feeling afraid and brave at the same time. He was sad about something that had happened long ago, but also happy about something that might happen tomorrow. He was angry at the aliens, but also curious about them. He felt lonely even, though he was surrounded by friends. How could one mind hold so many different feelings at once? Velthar had never seen anything like it. In Velity minds, there was one emotion at a time, clear and pure. But human emotions were like colors mixed together on a painter's cloth, swirling and changing and creating new combinations. Velthar tried to go deeper, looking for the core of the human's mind. Surely there had to be some order underneath all this chaos. But the deeper he went, the stranger it became. He found memories that made no sense. Jiho remembered being a small child and being afraid of the dark, but at the same time, he remembered being brave and protecting his little sister from bullies. He remembered failing a test at school and feeling stupid, but also remembered solving a difficult problem and feeling smart. Every good memory seemed to have a bad memory next to it, and every bad memory had some good mixed in. Then Velthar found something that made him want to run away. Deep in the human's mind, there was a darkness that no other species had ever shown him. It was the knowledge of death. Jiho knew that he would die someday. He had always known this, from the time he was very young. But instead of going crazy from this knowledge, he had learned to live with it. More than that, he had learned to find meaning because of it. The human believed that life was precious exactly because it would end. He thought that love mattered because people could lose each other. He tried to be good because his time to be good was limited. The knowledge that should have destroyed him had instead made him stronger. Velthar's mind reeled. The Velothi lived for thousands of years and rarely thought about death. When they did think about it, they pushed the thoughts away quickly. But this human carried the idea of death with him every day, and somehow found it beautiful. There was more. Jiho's mind was full of questions that had no answers. What was the purpose of life? Was there a God? Were humans alone in the universe? Why did bad things happen to good people? The human did not know the answers to these questions, but he kept thinking about them anyway. He seemed to enjoy not knowing, as if the mystery itself was valuable. Velthar tried to understand this, but it hurt his mind. The Velothi had always believed they knew the truth about most things. Their priests had clear answers. Their society had rules that made sense. But the human seemed to think that not having answers was somehow better than having them. The worst part was something the human called hope. Even though Jiho knew that terrible things could happen, even though he knew he would die, even though he knew that the universe was huge and uncaring, he still believed that tomorrow might be better than today. He still thought that his actions mattered. He still loved other people and tried to help them. This made no sense to Velthar. If life was short and full of pain, if the universe did not care about humans, if there were no certain answers to important questions, then why not give up? Why keep trying? Why keep hoping? But somehow, the human did keep trying. In fact, all of these terrible truths seemed to make him try harder, not less. The knowledge that his sister might be hurt made him want to protect her more. The knowledge that his friends would miss him made him want to be a better friend. The knowledge that his time was limited made him want to use it well. Velthar felt his own mind starting to crack under the weight of these ideas. He tried to pull back to escape from the human's thoughts, but he found that he could not. Something had changed in his own mind. The human's way of thinking was spreading through his consciousness like water through dry sand. For the first time in his long life, Velthar began to understand what it meant to be mortal. He began to feel the terrible weight of questions without answers. He began to see that his own perfect, orderly world might not be as perfect as he had always believed, and then the fear hit him. Real fear, not the simple concern that came from physical danger, but the deep, soul-crushing fear that came from understanding how small and helpless and temporary all thinking beings were in the face of an infinite universe. Velthar opened his mouth and began to scream. The sound that came out was not the measured voice of a high priest. It was the raw animal cry of a mind that had seen too much truth and could not handle it. He screamed and screamed, his hands still touching the human's head, unable to break the connection that was destroying everything he had ever believed about reality. The other Velathi in the room stepped back in shock. Their high priest, their most powerful and wise leader, was shrieking like a wounded animal. Something had gone terribly wrong with the ceremony, but Jiho just sat quietly, his eyes closed, letting the alien explore his mind. He had no idea that his simple human thoughts were driving the telepathic priest insane. The other Velathi priests rushed toward their screaming leader, but they stopped when they saw his face. Velthar's eyes were wide with terror, and tears were running down his cheeks. His mouth was open in an endless scream that echoed through the crystal chamber. "High Priest!" called one of the younger priests. "What is wrong? What did you see?" But Velthar could not answer. His mind was trapped between his own consciousness and the human's thoughts. Every time he tried to think in his usual clear, ordered way, Jiho's chaotic mental patterns pulled him back into confusion. The human's mind was like a storm that never ended. Velthar found himself thinking about things he had never considered before. What if the Velathi Empire was wrong about some things? What if their perfect society was not really perfect? What if there were better ways to live? These thoughts scared him more than anything he had ever experienced. His whole life had been built on the belief that the Velathi way was the only right way. But now he could see other possibilities, other ways of thinking, and he did not know which one was true anymore. Commander Kixtal, the leader of the Velathi military, entered the chamber with several guards. He took one look at the screaming priest and the calm human and made a quick decision. "Get the priest away from the human," he ordered. "Now!" Two guards grabbed Velthar's arms and tried to pull him back, but his hands seemed stuck to Jiho's head. Every time they moved him, he screamed louder. Finally, they managed to break the connection, and Velthar fell backward onto the soft cushions. But the screaming did not stop. If anything, it got worse. Velthar rolled back and forth, holding his head, making sounds like an animal in pain. The other priests tried to touch his mind to help him, but when they did, something terrible happened. The chaos spread to them too. The first priest who tried to help Velthar suddenly jerked backward as if he had been hit by lightning. His face went pale and he began to shake. "I can see it," he whispered. "I can see the meaninglessness. I can see the questions with no answers. How do they live with this? How do humans live knowing they will die?" The second priest who touched Velthar's mind started crying. "Everything we believe might be wrong," she said through her tears. "We might be wrong about everything. What if we have wasted our lives following rules that do not matter?" Commander Kixtal watched in horror as his most trusted advisors lost, their minds one by one. He did not understand what was happening, but he knew it was the human's fault. "Kill the human," he ordered his guards. "Now, before this spreads further." But Captain Jiho opened his eyes and looked at the commander calmly. "Killing me will not help your priests," he said. "What they have seen cannot be unseen. The thoughts are already in their minds." "What did you do to them?" Kixtal demanded. "What kind of weapon is this?" Jiho stood up slowly. He felt sorry for the aliens, but he was not afraid. It is not a weapon. It is just the way humans think. We cannot help it. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Sunmi and Taewon watched what was happening through their communication link. They could see the alien priests rolling on the ground and screaming, and they could see their captain standing in the middle of it all. "We have to help him," Sunmi said. But Taewon shook his head. "I think he is helping them, not the other way around. Look at the aliens. They are learning something they did not know before." Back in the crystal chamber, more Velothi were arriving to see what was wrong with their priests. Some of them tried to help by touching the affected priests' minds, and the chaos spread to them too. Soon, dozens of aliens were experiencing human-like thoughts for the first time. Some of them could not handle it. They ran away screaming, or they sat in corners rocking back and forth. But others seemed to find something valuable in the confusion. They stood quietly, thinking thoughts they had never thought before, feeling emotions they had never felt. One young Velothi female approached Jiho carefully. "Human," she said, her mental voice shaking. "I touched my teacher's mind, and now I can feel something new. I think you call it loneliness. I have never been alone before. We are always connected to each other. But now I feel separate, and it is frightening, but also—" She paused, looking for the right word. "Also wonderful. Is this what it means to be individual?" Jiho nodded. "Yes. Humans are individuals first. We choose when to connect with others. We choose when to be alone. It can be lonely, but it also makes our connections more meaningful." Commander Kickstall was growing more desperate. Half his crew was now affected by whatever the human had done to them. Some were still screaming, but others were asking strange questions and talking about things that made no sense. "This is spreading like a disease," he told his remaining unaffected officers. "We must contain it before it reaches the rest of the Empire. If this chaos spreads to our home worlds, our entire civilization could collapse." But it was already too late. The Velothi priests who had been affected were still connected to the greater Velothi consciousness network. Even though they were experiencing individual thoughts, part of their minds remained linked to their people across the galaxy. Without meaning to, they were transmitting the human mental patterns to Velothi on distant worlds. The chaos was spreading at the speed of thought through their telepathic network. On Velothi worlds hundreds of light years away, priests and leaders suddenly began asking questions they had never asked before. They began feeling emotions they had never felt. They began to understand that their perfect society might not be as perfect as they had believed. Velthar finally stopped screaming, but he did not get up from the floor. He lay there staring at the ceiling, his mind trying to process everything he had experienced. "Commander," he said in a weak voice, "we cannot fight this. It is not a weapon. It is just truth. The humans carry truth in their minds, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it." Kickstall knelt beside his high priest. "What? Truth? What did they show you?" Velthar turned his head to look at the commander. His eyes were different now, sadder but somehow wiser. "They showed me that we do not know everything. They showed me that it is possible to live without having all the answers. They showed me that meaning can come from struggle, not just from peace." The commander felt cold fear growing in his chest. If the high priest was right, if the humans had somehow infected his people with doubt and uncertainty, then the Velothi Empire as he knew it was doomed. But looking around the chamber, he saw something unexpected. The priests, who had stopped, screaming, were not giving up. They were talking to each other in new ways, asking questions, exploring ideas. They looked more alive than he had ever seen them before. Maybe the human chaos was not a disease after all. Maybe it was evolution. Captain Jiho looked around the chamber at the suffering aliens and made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. Instead of trying to escape or demand his freedom, he walked over to High Priest Velthar and sat down beside him. "You are in pain," Jiho said gently. "I can see that. I want to help you." Commander Kixtal raised his weapon. "Stay away from him, human. You have done enough damage." But Velthar held up a shaking hand. "Wait, Commander. Let him speak. I want to understand how they bear this suffering. How do humans live with these thoughts every day?" Jiho looked into the priest's large, frightened eyes. "It is not easy," he said honestly, "but we have learned ways to manage it. We have learned that the chaos in our minds does not have to destroy us. It can make us stronger." On the Dauntless, Sunmi was listening to everything through their communication link. She had an idea. "Captain," she said through her radio, "I studied alien psychology at the Academy. These beings are experiencing what we call an existential crisis. They need help learning how to process individual consciousness." Taewon stepped forward on the bridge. "Sunmi is right. And He paused, looking uncomfortable. "I have experience with minds that are broken. I spent 2 years in an alien prison camp. My mind was full of chaos and fear when I got out. I had to learn how to think again." Jiho heard his crew through his earpiece. He nodded and turned back to Velthar. "My friends want to help too. Can we bring them here? They know things about healing minds that might be useful." Kixtal started to refuse, but Velthar spoke first. "Yes, bring them. If there is a way to end this suffering, we must try it." Soon, Sunmi and Taewon were in the crystal chamber, looking at the dozen Velothi who were still struggling with their new awareness. Some were crying, some were rocking back and forth, and some were staring at nothing with confused expressions. Sunmi knelt beside a young Velothi priest who was whispering to himself. "What is he saying?" she asked. Velthar translated. "He is asking why we exist. He wants to know what the purpose of life is. Before today, we never asked such questions. We always believed our purpose was clear." "And now?" Jiho asked. "Now, we see that perhaps there is no clear purpose. Perhaps we must make our own purpose. But we do not know how." Taewon sat down with them. His voice was quiet and sad. "I understand. When I was freed from the prison camp, I felt the same way. Everything I had believed about life was broken. I did not know what was real anymore." The Velothi looked at him with interest. Here was someone who had survived the kind of mental chaos they were experiencing. "How did you heal?" Velthar asked. Taewon was quiet for a moment, remembering painful times. "First, I had to accept that some questions do not have answers. I had to stop trying to understand why bad things happened to me and start focusing on what I could do next." Sunmi added, "Humans call this mindfulness. We learn to live in the present moment instead of being overwhelmed by all our thoughts about the past and future." She began teaching the Velothi simple breathing exercises. "Focus only on your breath," she told them. "When other thoughts come, do not fight them. Just notice them and let them pass, like clouds in the sky." At first, the aliens struggled. Their minds were used to being connected to everyone else, always busy, always processing information. The idea of being quiet and still was foreign to them, but slowly some of them began to understand. One priest stopped crying and sat up straighter. "I can feel the difference," he said with wonder. "The thoughts are still there, but they are not controlling me." Jiho worked with Velthar personally. "The hardest part about being human," he explained, "is learning to live with uncertainty. We do not know why we exist. We do not know what happens after we die. We do not know if our choices really matter, but we choose to act as if they do matter. How can you choose to believe something when you do not know if it is true?" Velthar asked. "Because the alternative is giving up," Jiho said. "And giving up helps no one. Even if nothing we do matters in the end, it matters to us now. It matters to the people we love. That is enough." Taewon shared his own techniques for dealing with trauma and fear. "When bad memories come back, I do not try to forget them. I try to learn from them. I ask myself what they taught me about life, about people, about myself. Even the worst experiences can make us wiser if we let them." He told them about his time in the prison camp, about the friends he had lost, about the days when he had wanted to die. But he also told them about the small acts of kindness that had kept him alive, about the hope he had found even in the darkest moments. "Pain is not the enemy," he said. "Meaningless pain is the enemy. If we can find meaning in our suffering, if we can use it to help others or to become better people, then it was not wasted." The Velothi listened with fascination. They had never heard ideas like these before. In their society, pain was something to be avoided or quickly healed. The idea that suffering could have value was completely new. As the hours passed, more Velothi came to listen to the humans. They learned about concepts like forgiveness, which humans used to let go of anger. They learned about hope, which helped humans keep trying even when success seemed impossible. They learned about love, which made humans care for others, even though everyone they loved would eventually die. Most importantly, they learned about choice. Humans could choose how to respond to their thoughts and feelings. They did not have to be victims of their own minds. One of the older priests made a breakthrough. "I understand now," she said. "Before, we were like a river that flows only in one direction. But you humans are like the ocean, with currents going many ways at once. It seems chaotic, but there is still beauty in it. There is still purpose. Not all the Velothi could handle the transition. Some chose to have their memories of the experience erased, but many others embraced their new awareness. They formed small groups to practice the human techniques for managing complex thoughts and emotions. Commander Kixtal watched all of this with growing alarm. "This will change everything," he told Jiho. "Our entire civilization is based on shared consciousness and clear thinking. If our people become individuals like humans, our empire will fall apart." Jiho nodded. "Maybe it will, but maybe something better will take its place. Change is not always bad, even when it is difficult." Velthar stood up for the first time since the ceremony began. He was different now. More thoughtful, more humble. But he was also stronger in a way he had never been before. "Commander," he said, "I do not think our empire will fall apart. I think it will grow up." 3 months later, Captain Jiho stood in the same crystal chamber where everything had started. But now it looked different. The walls still glowed with soft light, but they had been changed to allow for more privacy. Small alcoves had been built where Velathi could go to think alone when they needed individual time. High Priest Velthar was different too. He still wore the white robes of his office, but his face was calmer and more thoughtful. He no longer shrieked when difficult. Thoughts entered his mind. Instead, he had learned to welcome them as teachers. The reports from across the Empire are remarkable, Velthar told Jiho. At first there was chaos as the new way of thinking spread. Many of our people were frightened. Some of our colonies tried to cut themselves off from the consciousness, network to avoid the infection. But they could not stop it? Jiho asked. No. Once an idea exists, it wants to spread. The concept of individual choice, of personal responsibility, of meaningful suffering. These ideas were too powerful to contain. Now, millions of Velathi across hundreds of worlds are learning to think like humans. Commander Kixtal entered the chamber. He too had changed. The rigid military bearing was still there, but his eyes showed a new kind of wisdom. Captain Jiho, he said formally, I owe you an apology. When this first began, I thought you had attacked us with some kind of weapon. I wanted to destroy your ship and your crew. And now? Jiho asked. Now I understand that you gave us a gift. You showed us that there were other ways to exist, other ways to find meaning in life. It was painful at first, but it was necessary. Sunmi and Taewon joined them in the chamber. They had spent the last 3 months helping to establish what the Velathi called healing centers across the Empire. These were places where Velathi could go to learn human techniques for managing complex emotions and thoughts. How are the centers working? Sunmi asked. Velthar smiled, an expression that would have been impossible for him before his contact with human consciousness. Better than we had hoped. We have learned that individual thinking does not mean we have to be alone. We can choose when to connect our minds and when to think independently. This choice makes our connections more meaningful, not less. The priest gestured toward a group of young Velathi who were practicing meditation in one corner of the chamber. They are learning to be comfortable with questions that have no answers. They are learning to find beauty in uncertainty. Most importantly, they are learning to take responsibility for their own thoughts and actions instead of following the collective without question. Taewon watched the young aliens with approval. They remind me of human children learning to walk. At first, they fall down a lot, but eventually they find their balance. There has been resistance, Kixtal admitted. Some of our oldest colonies refuse to accept the new ways. They say we are becoming weak and chaotic like humans. Are they right? Jiho asked. Velthar considered the question seriously. In some ways, yes. We are less organized than we used to be. Our decisions take longer because individuals must debate and choose instead of simply following orders. Our society is more chaotic. But, he continued, we are also more creative. Our scientists are making discoveries they never could have made before because they are willing to question old assumptions. Our artists are creating beauty that celebrates the complexity of existence instead of just its order. Our people are happier, even though they sometimes struggle with difficult thoughts. The most dramatic change had come in the Velathi government. The old system of absolute telepathic rule by priest leaders had evolved into something new. Now, important decisions were made by groups of individuals who chose to link their minds temporarily, bringing together different perspectives and ideas. We call it conscious democracy, Kixtal explained. Instead of everyone thinking the same thoughts, we combine many different thoughts to find better solutions. Sunmi was fascinated. So you kept the best parts of your telepathic abilities while adding human-style individual choice? Exactly. We discovered that the two approaches complement each other. Human individuality gives us creativity and personal responsibility. Velothi mental connection gives us empathy and cooperation. Together, they make us stronger than either approach alone. The transformation had not been without pain. Many older Velothi had struggled to adapt to the new way of thinking. Some had chosen to live in isolated communities where the old ways were preserved. But even these holdouts were slowly changing as younger generations grew up with both individual and collective consciousness. The most surprising discovery, Velthar said, was that humans are not as chaotic as we first thought. Yes, your minds contain many contradictory thoughts and emotions. But underneath all that complexity, there are patterns. There are deep values that guide your choices, even when you are confused about everything else. Jiho nodded. Humans learned, a long time ago, that having values is more important than having certainties. We do not always know what is true, but we try to know what is right. And that, said Velthar, is what we are learning from you. How to be good people even when we do not have all the answers. How to care for others even when we are uncertain about our own purpose. How to keep hope alive even when logic suggests that hope is foolish. A young Velothi approached their group. She was one of the first to fully master the balance between individual and collective thinking. High Priest, she said, the council is ready for the ceremony. Velthar turned to the humans. Would you like to witness something that has never happened before in Velothi history? We are about to perform our first voluntary mind link. Instead of connecting automatically as we always have, each member of the council will choose to join the link. They can leave whenever they want. They can keep parts of their thoughts private if they wish. The humans followed the aliens to a larger chamber where dozens of Velothi were seated in a circle. These were leaders from across the Empire, gathered to make an important decision about contact with other species. Before we met you, Velthar explained, we would have simply imposed our will on any new species we encountered. We would have forced them to think like us or destroyed them if they refused, but now we understand that diversity of thought is valuable. Different ways of thinking can teach us things we never could have learned alone. The ceremony began. One by one, the Velothi leaders chose to link their minds. But this time, instead of creating a single unified consciousness, they created something like a symphony, with each individual mind contributing its own unique voice to a larger harmony. Jiho watched in amazement as the aliens demonstrated their evolution. They had taken the best of human individuality and combined it with their natural telepathic gifts to create something entirely new. What are they deciding? Taewon asked. Whether to establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity, Kixtal replied, and whether to share what they have learned with other species in the galaxy. The decision took several hours, but finally the ceremony ended. Velthar approached the humans with a satisfied expression. The council has voted unanimously, he announced. We want to establish a permanent alliance with humanity. We also want to create joint exploration teams to seek out other species and share the gift of conscious choice with them. What if other species do not want to change the way we did? Sunmi asked. Then we will respect their choice, Velthar said. That is what you taught us. Everyone has the right to think their own thoughts and live their own lives. We cannot force wisdom on anyone. We can only offer it and hope they see its value." As they prepared to return to their ships, Jiho reflected on everything that had happened. What had started as a simple first contact mission had become something much more significant. Two very different species had found a way to learn from each other and become something greater than either could have been alone. "Do you think this will spread to other species?" Taiwan asked. Velthar overheard the question and answered, "I believe it will. Consciousness wants to grow. Intelligence wants to evolve. Once beings discover that they can choose their own thoughts, they rarely choose to give up that freedom." The High Priest looked at Captain Jiho with gratitude and respect. "You came to us as explorers seeking new worlds, but you gave us something far more valuable than territory or resources. You gave us the knowledge that there are always new ways to exist, new ways to think, new ways to find meaning in the universe." Jiho smiled. "That is what exploration is really about. Not just finding new places, but finding new possibilities." As the human ship prepared to depart, both crews knew that this was not an ending, but a beginning. The galaxy was full of species who had never imagined that consciousness could evolve, that minds could grow beyond their original limits. And now, thanks to a chance encounter between humans and Velathi, that evolution had begun. The universe would never be the same.